Hello and welcome to my review of A Christmas Carol, the Doctor Who one. No, I'm not going to suddenly start reviewing every Christmas Carol, because that would be dull. Yep, thanks for joining us on our Christmas special review series. If you like these, subscribe, please. So I'd say this episode is probably the most popular answer for people's favourite Doctor Who Christmas specials. Is it mine? No. Is it still very, very, very good? Yes. I use three veries because I know people are going to get irritated if it isn't my favourite. But A Christmas Carol is very, 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 very good. I love it. I love the singing segments. I should keep it. I will keep it. I think one of the things I just really, really love about this episode is the fairy tale stuff. It's been said quite commonly that the vibe Moffat brought to the show, especially in the early years and especially Series 5, is this kind of fairy tale vibe. Everything just feels so whimsical and magical, and even the early portrayal of Matt Smith in like the 11th Doctor kind of feels that way, where he's a bit bonkers and a bit wacky, but it's all kind of got that magic to it. Honestly, if you're looking for an example of that, Christmas Carol is that example. Because it has this mix of playing on this classic tale, but just being really sweet and fun. And I think that definitely works this episode's strengths. The fairy tale-y element of this works fantastically throughout. I can't give enough praise to Matt Smith in his early run of the show. Some Doctors and their actors take a little bit of time to get used to what the show requires of them. I love David Tennant, but I've always said his better performances come later in his era when he's more comfortable with the character. But I will say this, Matt Smith is actually probably better in his earlier series. He just really nails the role. And in Series 5 and in A Christmas Carol, he is truly fantastic. It's really interesting here seeing him have to deal with this character at many ages of his life and the way he interacts with that character. It's all really interesting and dealt with brilliantly by Matt Smith. Then we've got to talk about Michael Gambon, Albus Dumbledore himself, playing Kazran Stark. Stark, is it? Oh, I think so. Overall, this is very good. Sometimes it's a little generic. Sometimes it does just go into, I am abusive dad, so I shout. But overall, I think it's just really cool seeing one of these, because he'd just come off of doing one of, the biggest franchises of all time. So seeing him in this kind of role is just really fun, and he does a really good job. And his interactions with Matt Smith are fantastic. All of the acting performances here are great. Even very young Kazran, which is for an actor of that age, it's kind of odd for them to be that good, but he was very impressive. Now, at the centre of this kind of Christmas Carol story, because there's many different layers of story going on here, you've kind of got this story that kind of frames the whole thing being, we've got to save Amy and Rory. Then within that, obviously, we've got the Christmas Carol story kind of being told in a sci-fi setting. And then kind of within that, you've kind of got the love story that develops and all the messages around that. And overall, all of these work to a varying degree. I'm going to explain that because I think all of them work very well, apart from some elements for me of the Christmas Carol-y bit. Trust me, we're going to get onto a lot more positives in a sec, but I feel like this is the perfect point to give my little nitpick. I feel like this story is tough when you've then got to link it to the outside story. Because we're trying to make Kazran a better person throughout it, and we kind of see him as an older man, make changes and look back fondly and have all that stuff going on. Look, I know you've got the excuse that kind of he's still like this because he's got this love to deal with and he still feels bitter about that in a way. But I don't know, sometimes for me it feels like there's a bit of lazy storytelling going on. Like for example, the Christmas Eve before, Abigail's last day, this teen Kazran kind of just goes to the Doctor, nah, I don't really fancy seeing you anymore. And I don't know, some of it just, I feel like there was an extra little element that might have needed to happen there. Just because for me, it kind of feels like we have bad Kazran, we slowly make Kazran a better character, he remains bad, and then when he finally does switch, it just kind of, I don't know, comes off as a little bit odd. Let's talk about the other elements of this story. In terms of the Kazran and Abigail love story that kind of ends up weirdly being the centre of this story, and I think it's what makes this story beautiful. You know, all the Christmas Eves they spend together, and, like, also just the fun that comes from that, but also the emotions that come up from that. It's all fantastic stuff. And I also think this is where Michael Gambon's at his best, dealing with, like, the worst of that and with the best of that. And then I think you also managed with this Amy and Rory, like, B or C storyline, you kind of manage to occasionally inject some fun moments, but also give the story a little bit of stakes. If I were to have any other problems with this story, I think it's a little bit long. Not by tons, I think there's about 5 minutes here where I might shave. Or there's 5 minutes of storyline, for example, donated to a lot of the shark stuff near the beginning, where I'd probably donate some more of that to building the Kazran Abigail stuff maybe, or to flush out the ending a little bit more. But overall, I really do understand why people really love this episode. I think it doesn't help for me that I've always felt, you know, like the Christmas Carol story is a bit old, is done in many forms, and, you know, I think it's sometimes tough when, you know, there's so many versions of this story, each one of them kind of become a little bit less likeable with every version there is. But I think this is a fantastic way to do it, and I find this really, really enjoyable. I probably don't enjoy it as much as most seem to, but I still do genuinely think it's a fantastic episode. What do you think of A Christmas Carol? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. And subscribe! I think you should subscribe because you loved that review, because you got to the end of it. Therefore you watched it all, therefore you liked it. And right now, there is a Jadoon pointing to where there's a playlist of all of my Doctor Who Christmas special reviews. So go click it, look at your favourites or your least favourite, and see what I thought. They should click it, shouldn't they? Bojo, Kofo, Sobodobadova That was a Journey's End Stolen Earth reference, and it fell flat. I'm sorry, guys.